ready to move on to the next part of our project, which is to create the openings for the dog's legs and knit the vest, let's say, of the dog. In order to do this, we must divide our project into 4 parts. One part is the vest of the sweater, the other 2 parts are the 2 openings for the dog's legs, and another part is the area between the 2 front legs of the dog. In order to do this, we need to calculate our stitches. First of all, I know that the distance between the 2 front legs of my dog is 10 centimeters. So I will need to calculate how many stitches I will need for these 10 centimeters. Of course, this is easy because I have created this gauge, and I know that in order to get 10 centimeters I will need 14 stitches. I don't have to calculate it because it's 10 centimeters. If it was another number, then I would have used the rule of 3 in order to calculate it. Let me give you an example. For example, if the distance between the 2 front legs of my dog was 6 centimeters, let's say, then I would have multiplied 6 by 14 and then divided by 10. But of course, as I told you, there are online calculators that you can use in order to obtain these calculations. The next thing I need to know in order to decide the width of the legs openings is the circumference of the front leg of my dog, meaning that I need to measure this part of the dog's leg with a measuring tape. So I know that the circumference of my dog's leg is 20 centimeters. So for these 20 centimeters, it's easy to calculate it because it's double the 10. It's 28 stitches. But because I am going to knit this part of the dog's sweater in the round, so I'm going to use stitches from 2 rounds. This means that I will have to use 14 stitches in the round. I will explain to you later what I mean by this. And because I need 2 legs openings, not 1, these 14 stitches are multiplied by 2, so 28. And this means that I need 28 stitches for the legs openings. If we add up these stitches, 28 stitches for the legs openings and 14 stitches for the distance between the 2 front legs, this gives us 42 stitches. The total number of my stitches is 84, so if I take out 42, that leaves me with another 42 stitches. So these 42 stitches are going to be the vest of my dog. And now the next step is to divide the stitches of our project into these 4 parts. And I will do that by using stitch markers. The very first thing you should do is to make sure that you are at the beginning of your project, meaning that this should be your first stitch before the increases, the stitch that corresponds to the beginning of your project, the very first stitch. So I placed my marker here so it doesn't come off, and now the first thing I'm going to do is to place the markers for the distance between the front legs. As I said, for my dog the distance is 14 stitches. but I'm going to distribute these 14 stitches into both sides of my project. So I'm going to count 7 stitches from this side and 7 stitches from that side. I'm going to use different color markers because in this way it will be easier to know. So I'm going to count 7 stitches here. And now I'm going to count 7 stitches on the left side. So here, please, if you have a dog, it will be easier and more safe when you place your markers to put the sweater on the dog, and make sure that you have the correct leg openings for your dog. I don't have a dog here, unfortunately, so that's why I had to rely on my calculations. Here I have 7 stitches as well. So these stitches cover the distance between the 2 legs of my dog. And now I'm going to create the openings of the legs. In order to create the first leg opening, let's say on the right side, as I said, I need 14 stitches, so I'm going to count 14 stitches from here until I have 14 stitches. So here I have 14 stitches. Please always double check the stitch number. And I should have said that you should always check your stitch number while knitting in order to make sure that you follow the pattern or the calculations. So from the left side again, I'm going to count 14 stitches. Again, I'm going to say that I'm counting 14 stitches for my dog. You have to count the stitches that correspond to your dog size. So now, as you can see, I have one left leg opening. The distance between the 2 legs, this is the beginning of my stitches, and my right leg opening. This leaves me with this part of the vest, of the sweater, which is the upper part, the top, the part that will cover the dog's back, on top I mean. And now what I need to do is to show you how to create the legs openings. So this is the round where I'm going to prepare the sweater for the dog's openings. The first thing I need to do is to knit my stitches until I'm at the first stitch marker that marks the beginning of the opening. So I'm knitting these 7 stitches, and now I'm here where I should start working on the opening. So now I have to tell you some things about how we do it. There are several ways in order to create the leg opening for a dog sweater. One way is to just bind off these stitches that you need for the opening, and as we would work a buttonhole. And when you knit a few more rounds, then you cast on new stitches, as we did here, if you remember, in order to create the leash opening. This is one way. Another way is to use a stitch holder and place your stitches on the stitch holder and continue working with the rest of the project. I'm going to show you another way here. I think it's easier for people who are not very familiar with how to work on openings. So what I am going to do is to use another yarn. If you have scrap yarn, you can use it. Please try to use a yarn which is the same yarn type as the one you are using for the sweater. Unfortunately, I don't have one. I'm going to use this one. Another thing you should do is that you should use a contrasting color, so it will be easier for you later to find the stitches which are going to be used for the leg opening. What I am going to do with this other yarn is to knit the stitches that I'm going to use for the dog opening. So I'm going to knit them with this yarn, because as I said, this yarn is not the same type as the yarn I'm using for my project, and it's thinner. I'm going to knit my stitches a bit loosely, but of course if you use the same type of yarn, you don't have to do that. You don't need to have this marker here now, and I can take the other one out as well. Let me do it, please. And now what you need to do, please be extra careful on this, you need to turn your project like this. So now you have the wrong side of your project, the back side of your project facing you, and you are going to place these stitches that you knitted with this contrasting color into your right needle. In this way, now I'm going to cut off a long tail, just to be sure. Maybe you can also tie a loose knot if you like. Like this. So now I have the stitches that I need for the left leg opening with the white color. I did this because I'm not going to work on the legs right now. I'm going to leave these stitches like this, and when I finish the rest of the sweater, I'm going to knit the legs. Of course, if you prefer, another way to do it is to just knit a few rows and then come back and knit the legs. So the next thing we do is continue knitting the sweater. First, I'm going to knit these stitches with the contrasting color, in my case it's white. So now I have these stitches which are knitted in another color, and I know that later I'm going to use these stitches in order to create the opening of the leg. I'm going to undo these stitches or tink them if you prefer, in order to create the leg opening. But for now I'm going to continue knitting around until I reach the next stitch marker, which marks my other leg opening, and there I am going to do the same thing. So please knit your stitches until you reach the next stitch marker, and I will meet you there. So I have reached the marker that marks the leg opening. I can take it out now, and I am going to do the same thing. I am going to knit with the white yarn the stitches that are meant to be used for my leg opening. Please leave a long tail and insert your needle into the stitch which is on your left needle and create a knit stitch. Pull it down and then continue I've reached the next marker. I'm taking it out, and now I'm going to count my stitches. 14 stitches. If you use a scrap yarn, you don't have to cut it off, but because my yarn is a skein, I'm going to cut it off and tie it into a knot, just a loose knot. So now again I'm going to turn my work, so I'm going to be facing the back of my project, and I'm going to slip these stitches into my right needle. And now I am going to, let me wrap the yarn around my neck, because by this time you know that I knit in the Greek way. I'm going to turn my work, so now the stitches in the white yarn are on my left hand, on my left needle and my left hand, and I'm going to knit these stitches. I'll pull down the last one, and now I'm ready to continue knitting the sweater. After I have created these two leg openings, I am going to knit in the round until I reach the size I need for the body. You will have to measure your dog from the front leg to somewhere near here, and knit around until you reach this point of the dog's body. As you can see, I have knitted the rounds I need for my dog's body. I also knitted one leg. I'm going to show you how to knit the other leg when I finish with the body part. I stopped about here because I'm knitting this sweater for a male dog, and when we knit for male dogs they need a part which is not covered by the sweater in order to be comfortable. So now I'm about here, and what I need to do is to knit the part that will cover this part of the dog's body. I will show you how to knit that part of the sweater and how to create the shape of it in my next tutorial, so please join me.